First of all, thank you all for praying for me. Had a really, really bad bout with vertigo this week. Wasn't able to walk, staggered around and bumped into walls and things like that. Got on the prayer chain, you guys prayed, and I'm standing here today. Didn't fall up the stairs, didn't fall coming over, and plan not to fall during the message. So we are giving all the praise to the Lord for the fact that I'm standing. Even though I feel drunk, I'm not. All right? So here's the Christmas season. It's coming upon us. And we as Christians see the Christmas season as profoundly important because of all that it represents. But when I look at our experience of the Christmas season, it often isn't what we think it should be. It should be a time of reflection. It should be a time of profound thankfulness for his birth, for his death, for what he did for us. It should be literally filled with peace. Do you remember the angels on the night they announced his birth to the shepherds? What did they say? Peace on earth and goodwill towards men. Peace on earth. Now, one of the devil's principal strategies in our life is to take the things of God and turn them upside down. He's always about working for the opposite. So in this season, which should be absolutely full of peace, what do we find? Stress. I'm so glad you used the same word that came to my mind, stress. The season of stress, the season of busyness, the season of running around, the season of spending more money than we actually have. Isn't that the opposite of everything that Christmas is supposed to be? So, today's message is putting the peace back in Christmas. Where does the peace of God come from? How do we get it? And how can we protect it and maintain it? When I think about that, I think that the peace of God comes from entering into his presence. Are you with me on that? When we become conscious of God's presence, we enter into his presence, the first thing we experience is peace. I do these exercises with people all over the world where we simply practice acknowledging that God is with us right now. If we won't take the time, but if we all closed our eyes and we simply said this, God, you are here right now. You're here in this room right now. You are here with me right now. And we merely acknowledge his presence and focus on even the idea of his presence. A stillness comes over the room. And then we take a minute to be in the stillness and I say, tell me what you're experiencing right now. The common word, the word that comes up over and over and over again is peace. I feel his peace. I feel at peace. Peace is the first sign of the presence of God. But it's dependent upon entering into the presence of God. What do we mean by entering into the presence of God? The Bible tells us that God is omnipresent, which means he's always present. He's always here. His Spirit is always with you. The Spirit is in you. So it's not a matter of where he is. The real issue isn't his presence, but our awareness of his presence. Am I aware of the presence of God? And our peace comes from entering into the awareness of his presence. And the awareness of his presence leads to the experience of his presence. And the experience of his presence almost always leads to peace. Our peace comes from making contact with him right now. And this phrase, right now, is really, really important. The only time you have available to experience God's peace is right now. It's true. It sounds trite, doesn't it? But that's the absolute truth. The only moment you have to experience God's peace is this moment right now. And Satan has an agenda. And it's really, really simple. All he wants to do is to prevent you from coming into the experience of God's presence right now. Isn't life interesting? There's memories, there's the future and the hopes and the dreams and the unfulfilled expectations. And there's the past with the memories, and then there's this present moment. And when you think about it, this present moment is all you have. This present moment is your opportunity to be with him. This is your present moment. This is the opportunity to know him. This is where his peace is found. And so Satan will do anything he can to prevent you from entering into God's presence right now. How does he do it? How does he distract you from God's presence right now? There's 3 ways. Let's guess. What are some of the ways he diverts you away from entering into God's presence in this moment? Who said shame? Brilliant. Brilliant. He reminds you of your past failures, which is where shame lives, which is where shame comes from. He reminds you of your past failures so that you become mired in the belief that you do not deserve to receive God's attention right now. How many of you have had that experience? Right? You come to be with God, and before you know it, you're finding yourself dwelling on your failures and thinking about your past mistakes. And before you know it, you feel this sense of shame, like I don't deserve to come into God's presence. Why would he want to be with me now anyway? Who am I to presume that I can be with him? He's busy running the universe, and who am I? Past failures. And you're in effect robbed of your confidence as a well-loved child. A few weeks ago, I spoke to you about our primary identity being a child of God, not a servant of God. Jesus said, I don't call you servants anymore, I call you friends. And the ministry, the work of the Holy Spirit is to make real to us our childhood in God, our identity as his well-loved child. And how can you receive his peace if you don't believe you're his well-loved child? So you feel unworthy, so you don't seek to enter into his presence. That's one way that Satan robs you of the present moment with God, is reminding you of your past failures. What's another one? Not yet. There's the past, I'm hinting. There's the past, that's a distraction. That's where the shame lives. The future, worrying about your future. If he can get you worrying about your unmet needs, if he can get you worrying about your unanswered prayers, if he can get you worrying about the stock market, if he can get you worrying about this and that and the other thing, everything in the future, then he can rob you of God's experience in the present moment. The past and the future. Guys, think about it. We spend more time worrying about the past and the future than we do being in the present. The present is robbed of, the present moment is the only time you have to experiencing anything of value. And so much of the time we spend our time worrying about what happened or what hasn't happened or what might happen. Once you start worrying about your future, you step out of the right now. And the right now is your only moment. If we all closed our eyes so no one saw one another, and maybe it's dark enough that we can actually get away with this, how many of you regularly worry about the future? My hand goes up first. I live to worry about the future. No, I mean, it's my job description. This is what I do. I simply worry about the future. I don't even care about the shame of the past. I've let that go. I'm focusing entirely on the problems to come. I've halfway won. And my present moment is corrupted, stolen from me by anxiety. Hello? Anybody? Anxiety? Worrying about the future? And what does Jesus say about that? You have enough trouble right now. Stop worrying about the future. Find my presence. Come to me, you who are heavy burdened, and I'll give you rest/peace. Okay, so we've got the distraction from the past with shame. and we've got anxiety about the future. There's a third way that he robs us of the peace of God in the present moment. And that's
busyness.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a whole host of things. It's busyness. It's the present distractions in this moment. Like my appearance, the pain in my foot, that person who was impolite to me on the freeway, my impoliteness to the person who was impolite to me on the freeway. What am I going to do this afternoon? The hair on the person sitting in front of you at church, or a tempting fantasy. Whatever. Anything in the present moment to distract you from Him. But the truth is, the only time we have is right now. So how important is it to come into the presence of God moment by moment? And is it even possible? Can we become habitually aware, from moment to moment, scene to scene, life moment to life moment? Can we become aware of His presence? Can we learn to live in His presence rather than the shame of the past or rather than the anxiety of the future? Back in the 1600s in France, there was a poor illiterate man, street person, named Nicholas Herman. He was in the army. The only skill he had was killing. When he got out of the army, he had no future. So he wandered the streets. And he asked to join a monastery. It was pretty much the only alternative. And because he had no skills other than soldiering, he was sent to work in the kitchen where he washed dishes and he ran errands. And he was very aware of his shame. He was very, very aware of his uselessness. So he got this idea, all I can really do is worship between the jobs I have to do. He's working in the kitchen, he's washing dishes, he's cleaning up. But there's these moments between events where I can simply worship God. So he started to do that. He began trying to find God's presence between the tasks. But as time passed, a strange thing began to happen in the kitchen. The monks in the monastery started finding excuses to come and work in the kitchen. And they found excuses to spend time in the kitchen. And soon the head of the monastery started coming to spend time in the kitchen. Because the kitchen was filled with the presence of God. They started asking Nicholas, who is now called Brother Lawrence, questions about his relationship with God. You see, he radiated peace, and they weren't. Aristocrats in Paris started coming to sit in the kitchen while Brother Lawrence washed dishes. It's reported that the King of France came to the kitchen just to be near Brother Lawrence. And they all asked him for his wisdom, so he wrote a little book, Practicing the Presence of God. And it's one of the most important Christian classics of all time. So how do we enter into God's presence in our linked and many right nows? Our linked and many right nows. Well, there's a secret to this. And it has to do with stillness, which is very rare in the Christmas season. Real stillness. Exodus 14, It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible, Exodus 14, verses 13 to 14. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Now, the Egyptians, of course, in this passage represented their biggest problem. The Egyptians represented the thing in the future that was just about to go terribly wrong. And we all have something in our life that we fear is going to go terribly wrong. And our temptation is to fight about it, to get into anxiety about it, to worry about it, to strategize about it. And the Lord is saying, these problems you see today, you'll never see again. The Lord will fight for you. I will fight for you. You need only to be still. 1 Samuel 12:16. Now then, stand still and see the great thing the Lord is about to do before your eyes. Psalm 37:7. Be before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Zechariah 2:3. Be still before the Lord. Psalm 46:10. It's famous. Be still and know that I am God. You see, in Psalm 46:10, the experience of stillness and the experience of knowing God are linked. There's a direct link between the two. Stillness is the path to the experience of God, and stillness is the path to his peace. So there's this connection between being still and knowing God. So this means it's really smart if we dig in and figure out what the biblical word stillness means. What does the Bible mean when it says to be still? The word know in Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. It means to recognize. Like to be, it's also a word of familiarity. It means to recognize or be acquainted with a familiar friend. It's referring to an actual relationship. It's not be still and you'll have more facts about God. Be still and you'll understand more theology about God. Be still and you'll understand the historicity of Jesus. No, it's be still and you'll have a relationship with God. And it's in this relationship that we find the peace. And the actual word used here, it's really interesting. You see, Hebrew is a very pictorial language. There's usually a picture that hides behind many Hebrew words. Like, for instance, the Hebrew word for depression is his jaw fell, like this. And the word, and there are, by the way, several Hebrew words that are translated as still. And they all have real significance in understanding the nature of stillness. But the word used here, be still and know that I'm God, means this: to slacken, to cease, or to let go. And the image you would have is of a donkey or a camel with a rope from his bridle running to, say, a post where he's tied up. And this animal is resisting and pulling and trying to get free, and the rope is absolutely taut, perfectly straight. And you would say to the camel, you might say, still the rope. Make the rope still. And that would mean that rather than pulling, he would step forward and the rope would go slack. It's to take the pressure off. It's literally translated to cease, to take the pressure off, to let go of, to slacken. When we slow down and we become still, we take the pressure off. We let go. We let go of our worries. We let go of our expectations for ourselves and for others. We even let go of our expectations of God. How many times do we come to him out of desperation, saying, what you've got to do for me now is to fix this problem? You see, we come into his presence working on a solution rather than coming into his presence to be with him. You see, when the peace we have is associated with a solution, it's circumstantial. When the peace we have is related to a relationship, it's eternal. It's not related to circumstances. It rises above circumstances. It's a peace that comes from a relationship. And oftentimes we come to him seeking a solution, and there's nothing wrong with that. He told us to pray that way. He said, come to me as children to a loving Father. Come to me with your problems. But he's saying, come to me with your problems. The relationship is always the principal thing. When we slow down and we become still, we literally let go of those things we're worrying about. Now, it sounds simple, of course, but it's not. There's a struggle involved. But we can learn to do that. We can learn to give over these expectations to him. In Psalm 37:7, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. The word that we translate as still actually means to be quiet. It actually means to stop speaking. To tarry, it means to wait. To be silent, to tarry, and to wait. Although it means to be silent physically, to stop talking, it means more than that. It's to stop worrying. It's to stop running over all the anxieties and all the problems and all the unmet prayers. It involves letting go of our worries and our agendas and our plans. And how often have you found that the thing that stands between you and coming into the presence of God are your busy thoughts? Anybody? I mean, come on, let's be honest here. That those clamoring, busy thoughts. The word stillness used in the Bible has three meanings. The first is to be physically still. Just sit down and be still, which in itself is difficult. The second one is to be quiet and stop talking, which goes beyond mere speech. It goes into letting go of all of these clamoring thoughts. But the third one is to enter into a spiritual rest, and this is described in Psalm 131. And it says this: my heart is not proud, my eyes are not haughty or arrogant. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. But I've stilled, which means to adjust, to yield, to let go of, my heart. And I've quieted my spirit, which means to be silent, to tarry, to wait, or to rest. I've quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. And that's describing the state of rest that comes as we've stilled our minds and we've let go of our worries and we've begun to enter into this place with him where all we're doing is simply resting. In such a way that we're like a well-fed child. A weaned child is a child that isn't breastfeeding anymore. It's fed. And we're lying in mother's arms. And we're still. And we're at peace. I remember talking about this years ago with young families and young mothers. Talking about a weaned child at its mother's breast. And one mother said to me, she said, I know exactly what you're talking about. She said, my baby, when he comes to me for food, his hands are like this and his face is red and he's in a rage. And all he wants is food. He wants to feed. And she said, and I begin to feed him. And as he feeds, I just love this image. She said, I know when he's done because his hands are open. The rage is gone. She said, as he's feeding slowly, his hands open. And when he's fully fed, his hands are open and he's at peace and he's simply resting. I just love that image, because we come to God just like that, all wound up, worrying about this, that, and the other thing, and the busyness and the craziness of life. But as we will simply be with him and let him hold us and feed us from his Spirit and give us his peace, we will slowly let go of all those crazy things that all of a sudden just aren't important right now, because something greater is happening right now. Stillness of heart is letting go of your pride, the roles that you live, your job, your expectations, even letting go of your self-worth, just to be a child against his chest. And it's tied to physical stillness and silence. Want to do it? Should we do it right now? Should we have a right now God moment? Yes. Okay, close your eyes, and I'm going to read that psalm to you very slowly. And we're going to pray this psalm to the Lord and enter into this experience, and we're going to test it and see what happens. And I want you to take these words as your own as I read them. Just take them as your own and confess it. My heart is not proud, Father. My eyes aren't fraught with worry. And I don't concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. But I seek stillness. And I'm letting go of all those thoughts and all those anxieties. And I'm quietening my soul. I'm resting just to be with you. Like a well-fed child with its mother. Like a well-fed child is my soul, my emotions, my mind within me. My heart is not proud, Father. I don't concern myself with all these things I worry about. They're too much for me. They're beyond me. But I've stilled and adjusted my heart, and I'm letting go of all those things. I've quieted my spirit. I'm resting. My mind is resting with you. My emotions are resting with you. My body is resting with you. I'm a well-fed child. My soul is like a well-fed child resting with you. You're here right now. Father, you're here right now. How are you present for me right now? Father, how are you present for me right now? Because you are, because you're here. How do I sense your presence right now, Lord? How are you revealing yourself to me right now? How is he present for you right now? What do you feel? What's he saying to you right now? What do you say to him? So we make time between the crazy events. We find a place to sit and be still for 10 minutes. We sit comfortably, and as the crazy thoughts come and the busyness comes, we just dismiss them. Because right now, in this moment, I'm here to become aware of your presence, Father. Those other things, they're important, but they're not important right now. Right now, they're not important. Right now is time for you. I'm here to become aware of your presence. And I know you're here right now. You're here right now. And I keep repeating this. You're here right now. How are you here for me right now? How are you present for me right now? How are you revealing yourself to me right now? And then I wait, and then you wait, and you pay attention. What am I feeling right now? What is my spirit experiencing? What do I feel emotionally? And you listen. What are you saying to me right now? Is there anything you want to say to me right now? And as you do this, you become aware of his presence. And you receive his peace, which is the only thing you really, really, really need. And some days it's very powerful, and some days it's subtle. But every time you leave that moment, you leave closer to him than when you first sat still. And you leave with more peace and more hope than when you started. Imagine, fathers, if when you come home from work, before you come into the house, you sit in the car for 10 minutes and you become aware of his presence. And you pray this psalm, and he begins to manifest his presence to you in that short period of time. Imagine what the time with the family and your wife would be like if you did that before you entered the house. Mothers, imagine if you spent that time before your husband came home. Just 5-10 minutes of stillness. What would that do to our relationships? What if before you had that stressful meeting that you know you have to go to and that you've been worrying about, if you sat down and got still for 10 minutes before that meeting and you entered into the presence of God and you felt his stillness and his peace? How would that change the meeting? What if you do the same thing before you get to work? You just sit in the car for a few minutes and find his presence. That difficult confrontation you have to have with that person, how would that change it? What would you bring into the situation because you spent that time with your Father? Satan has an agenda this Christmas. And it's simply to rob you of your peace. God has an agenda for this Christmas. Peace in your life and goodwill towards you. But it doesn't happen automatically. It happens because we make room for him. And it really only takes a few minutes here and there. So God bless you with a truly peaceful Christmas.